Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the LTL podcast. A little bit of a pop-up show this afternoon. I had a little bit of time, so I thought I'd come on, and I've been meaning to do this stream. It's probably only going to take us about an hour to get through it, but I found this really fascinating I wouldn't say documentary, but this little series that Court TV did the other day on how serial killers hide in plain sight. It has a lot to do with Rex Heuermann. They talk about the BTK killer, and they also talk about Ted Bundy as well. So I thought this would be a great little lunchtime segment for you all. If you're here live with us right now, you can chat to the right-hand side of the screen. If not, when this video posts, it would be great if you could comment #replay. So I'm not going to waste too much time. I thought I'd just do a little lunchtime content for everybody here this afternoon. We'll pull up this little series that they did and have like a little bit of a watch party here. But before I do that, I'm going to recognize a few people in the chat. We have Victorine here, Danielle's hanging out, and Christy's here as well. So again, as the chat fills in, feel free to chat and we'll get through this together. All right, let's bring this up. Court TV, how serial killers hide in plain sight.
Rex Heuermann appeared to be an average man, living in his home on Long Island and commuting into New York City every day, where he worked as an architect. But authorities in New York say that Rex had a dark secret. The middle-aged father and husband is charged with the murders of 3 women and implicated in the murder of a 4th. The investigation into the alleged Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is ongoing. And tonight, we're bringing in our experts to try and understand how serial killers hide in plain sight, psychology that drives them to kill, and why the public is fascinated by them.
Yeah, Danielle, I hope you're feeling better.
Good evening and welcome to Closing Arguments. I'm Michael Ayala, in tonight for Vinnie Politan. In 2010,
Vinny.
The bodies of 4 women, Maureen Brainerd Barnes, Melissa Barthelemy, Megan Waterman, and Amber Lynn Costello, were discovered along Ocean Parkway near Gilgo Beach in Long Island, New York. Now, 13 years later, officials announced that this man, 59-year-old New York architect Rex Heuermann, is charged with 3 of their murders and remains the main suspect in the 4th. Now, Heuermann has pleaded not guilty in the case, but prosecutors believe Heuermann is the killer, and that for those 13 years, he had been hiding in plain sight, traveling every day from Long Island to New York with millions of other people by train, and possibly committing more crimes when no one was looking. Court TV crime and justice correspondent Matt Johnson retraced the accused killer's daily commute.
On this unsuspecting suburban street, suspected serial killer Rex Heuermann lived. This street is full of doctors, teachers, and law enforcement. The street is tree-lined, there are American flags out, and welcome signs. This is the house that is very different, if you ask me. Owned by an architect, this is the home of Rex Heuermann. He shared this house many years with his wife and kids, leaving each day in a suit and tie. But prosecutors say it was all part of his plan to blend in, to look normal. And that included his daily commute to the city. Just a few blocks away from Rex Heuermann's home is this, the Long Island train station, Massapequa Park. This is the platform Rex Heuermann would go to each and every day, as he would be in a suit and tie and head to New York City, 5th Avenue, where his architecture firm office was located. We're going to hop on a train now and show you his commute.
Pretty fascinating.
So the train's just arrived. We're going to get on board and we'll take you to Manhattan. All right, so we're approaching our stop. This is Penn Station. This is near his work. This is the train stop. So I had a timer going, about 52 minutes so far. I'm noticing, everyday people on board, some business people. This would be a train that anybody would blend in. And that's exactly what he did for so many years. All right, so we made it to our stop. This is Penn Station, New York. If it looks a little busy, it is. According to the website, more than 600,000 people pass through here each and every weekday.
I believe it.
So now we're in the heart of New York City. We've passed a few famous landmarks, including the Empire State Building and also the famous Macy's. Brings us here to 5th Avenue, 385 5th Avenue, and this is where Rex Heuermann worked as an architect, founding his architecture firm, RHC Consultants and Associates, back in 1994. It wasn't too far from here where he was arrested.
That's right.
All right, with us tonight, psychotherapist and author of The Minds of Mass Killers, Understanding and Interrupting the Pathway of Violence,
100%,
Siobhan Scott,
Danielle.
and psychotherapist and CEO of Life Counseling Solutions, Dr. Janie Lacey. Also with us, Professor of Forensic Psychology, Dr. Catherine Ramsland. Thank you all so much for joining me tonight. Truly appreciate it. And Siobhan, I'll start with you.
Nothing on BK.
The idea that we could be traveling on a train, going wherever, going about our business, our daily commutes, and we could be sitting amongst a serial killer, someone who has murderous thoughts, ideas, is scary. Is it, I mean, explain to me how they can get away with this kind of thing that on one side, there's obviously a dark side where they have these thoughts that lead them to do things that are unthinkable, but yet and still they develop a consulting business, ride on commuter trains for an hour every single day and blend in nicely, even with a family.
Yeah, you're describing a very effective sadistic psychopath. And so they are very different from the rest of us. They're amazingly good at compartmentalizing, at keeping secrets, and at hiding these really sadistic and awful aspects of themselves. So very often their family members don't even have any idea. It's very hard for the rest of us to wrap our minds around how this can be, because we don't think like that. We're not sadistic psychopaths, but I do think that's what we're happening when we see a person like this.
I got it. Thank you so much.
Dr. Lacey, help us understand how someone could be, quote unquote, a psychopath, yet and still be able to function in a way that I think it's fair to say most people, and we've...
I got your email, Mimi. Thank you so much. I think that's a great piece of information you sent over, and something that I'm definitely going to bring up in a future stream. So thank you. We're going to bring that up soon. I have something in the works. So thank you. Appreciate that. I wrote you back. I said I was going to look into it. Thank you.
Seeing this in a number of serial killers, Ted Bundy comes to mind, where people don't even know. They don't have a sense that something's off. A lot of times you come across people and you say, something's off about this guy. And at some point that comes to fruition in a way that people realize what they're dealing with. That's not really what happened here, and God knows how long he might have been going along had it not been for the investigations continuing on.
Absolutely. We look at something where we call splitting. So there's this one part of them, and they are very strategic because they have to blend in, as we're talking about, with society, so they can be socially acceptable. So they wear this mask where they can conceal their true nature. Right. So by blending in and preparing and looking like they're ordinary, then people are not going to suspect them. They're not going to look around and think, for the most part, this person may be a serial killer. So when they're in the split nature, they're going to put themselves in socially acceptable, normal situations to evade any type of arousal that something is wrong. And we look at it from a split self. It's almost as if they're operating from that self that we can all look at and just think they're another normal person, for example. And then there's that true dark evil side, which then creates and does these heinous crimes that we're constantly hearing about.
Dr. Ramsland, what's particularly scary about that, for I think many people, for myself included, is it seems like there's a suggestion here from, I'm listening to the answers, that there's a measure of control
I always get nailed
that these guys obviously must have. And that to me is extremely scary. Is it safe to say that, is that the right characterization? If they can function this way, if they can have these two faces per se, does that suggest that they really do have control on some level of these urges, or whatever you want to call them?
Well, first they have control of people around them because they're trying to manipulate expectations so that they read people, they figure out what people want to see as normal. And that goes a long ways for fooling people and tricking people, deceiving them. But for them, there is a degree of control because they're not doing this when they can get caught. They're doing it when they think they can't get caught. So they have self-control, but there still is, for some, a compulsion that's very, very strong that they want to follow.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because you mentioned that, and apparently his family, every time he did this, the family was not in town, but it's certainly, this whole situation raises the question as to what they knew or when they knew or if they knew at all. For instance, serial killer Dennis Rader, known as the BTK killer, is serving 10 consecutive life sentences for a string of murders that occurred between 1974 and 1991. Now, he wouldn't be arrested until 2005. For decades before his arrest, Rader was reportedly well-liked and regarded in his community. Well, Vinnie Politan spoke to his daughter, Carrie Rawson, about what it was like learning that her father was a serial killer after all those years. Take a listen.
We knew they were looking for BTK, but it wasn't until there was a knock on my door by an FBI agent, literally saying, like, I need to talk to you. And then he just dropped it and he said, your dad is BTK. And so for us, it was just a total, absolutely shock, completely floored. I went into medical shock. I was shaking for 5 days. It took 3 or 4 days to get me back home due to the media and everything going on. An FBI agent, he's like trying to like question me and get information. I said BTK cuts phone lines, and I knew my neighbor's phone line had been cut. And I knew she had been missing. She had like been taken from her house and found a few weeks later out in the woods. And she had been strangled. And as a 6-year-old, I knew that. So like these things I knew in 85 now are coming back in 2005. And I'm sitting here alibying my father and defending him.
Wow.
And then all of a sudden I'm literally turning him in on a murder they hadn't arrested him on.
Hey, mind
and
you.
So like your whole world is imploding and you're sitting there starting to like in that first few hours, like realizing like the man you knew that raised you is not who you thought he was.
Dr. Lacey, we've heard over and over from family members. I listened to a podcast recently from the Happy Face killer, his daughter. She's actually even raising money now for the family, for the Heuermann family. And family member after family member saying they weren't aware what was going on, even in hindsight. You know, a lot of times things happen and you look back and say in hindsight, oh, that was weird, this was weird. We're not seeing that in these cases. Are we? There's enough of them that I tend to believe them. Should we be believing them?
We should believe them because what happens with a lot of these serial killers is they have this possession or they have the ability, I should say, to possess the ability to charm and to manipulate people, as I heard my fellow panelists mention. So what that means is they have this charisma to gain trust and build relationships. And right there with their family, that's going to be part of that mask that they possess so that no one will be suspicious of what's going on. So they have this image of respectability, even though when we dig deeper into the family systems, they may not have been as present. They may not have been as connected to their family members, but we also see that in our non-serial killer counterparts, right? So some family members may not necessarily see that as anything out of the norm because their serial killers will create a certain level of normacy within their family systems.
Yeah, I think that's clearly what happened here, no question about it. Siobhan, when we look at the situation and we look at the victims, and I think and again, these are anecdotal, but a lot of these serial killers tend to choose sex workers, seem to be a common victim in these cases. Is that part of their control? This idea sounds to me like this whole two-faced thing and the idea that they can have this normal life on one side and this ability to do this on the other is a lot about control. Are these victims about something else, in fact, if they're sex workers, or is that all part of the control aspect of their personalities?
I think it's probably all of the above. There's also another aspect to sex workers that they've connected with. These are often throwaway women that they feel they can eliminate, and people are not going to miss them as much. They're not going to get a lot of media attention,
Good point.
and it increases the odds that they're not going to get caught if they prey on women in this category who are very vulnerable.
And you know, Dr. Ramsland, one of the things that I think a lot of people have been asking, I know I've wondered about this. It seems as though these murders happened in 2010.
Hey,
and as
Cindy.
far as investigators know right now, there really hasn't been a lot of activity since then that can be connected to him. That doesn't mean he wasn't out there being active or not. Is it something that these folks can stop doing at some point? Or is this the type of situation where this is going to be with them unless they're getting it treated in some way? Again, I don't even know if that would help. But is it possible that he committed these crimes, sated whatever demon was in him, and had walked away from that life? Or do you suspect something else was going on somewhere?
Well, we don't really know his motive at this point. It could have been anger. It could have been a mission. It might have been sexually compelled. We're guessing. And if it's anger, he could easily stop. And I can name a dozen serial killers who have stopped. It was an idea from the 1990s from some studies that serial killers can't stop. That's typically about sexually motivated serial killers because they are addicted to what they're doing. But we do have killers who have stopped, and I think that is a possibility.
Well, looking at the way he killed his victims here, the meticulous nature with which he sort of dismembered them, wrapped them up in burlap, did different things, and what we know about how they were murdered at this point. And again, I want to emphasize he is innocent until proven guilty, but there is a lot of evidence at this point pointing to him. But at the end of the day, we don't know if he did this, but whoever did this. Dr. Lacey, what does this suggest? Was this, it doesn't feel like an anger killing, or can they look this way?
So, what I heard my fellow panelists say to also give the other side to that is that if they're not necessarily acting out in that anger, reactive, they can also be obsessing and fantasizing and creating these scenarios in their mind before they're actually acting out, which is, if we kind of look at that addictive cycle just in general, we will look at it from a binge standpoint, right? So in that standpoint, there could be these things that he could be fantasizing, thinking about, and then we get that buildup to the actual emotionality or the anger or whatever may be his motive to actually carry it out. So it can look like inside his mind, there could be some type of ritualization that may occur that we may find out once we get all the facts.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, now Heuermann, he was arrested leaving his Midtown Manhattan office. Law enforcement officials raided that office after Heuermann was taken into custody. Well, Court TV crime and justice correspondent Matt Johnson actually spoke to a man who works in that building. Here's what he had to say.
I was kind of like speechless. I was kind of surprised that it was him that was up here. He was on the 11th floor. We're on the 10th floor. It's not a big office. It's like it's part of the floor. So
we've been covering it. I've been covering it.
I've never seen his office, but
I just think it's strange that, and I've been saying this all along, Cater, that I think that if this guy is accused and did all this, and then we find out he's done more, he could literally be the most prolific serial killer in all time of history, at least in U.S. history. But yeah,
that's
not
news
the hot
I got
topic, I guess.
On that Friday,
we will cover it.
When it was all surrounded by troopers, police, and reporters. The arrest was about a block away, but I guess the police here came to check his office and collect all the evidence, whatever, so.
Siobhan Scott, when I listen to that guy talk, he seems very matter-of-fact about the whole thing, but at the end of the day, he was working next to and in the same office as a serial killer, or possibly someone who's been alleged to be a serial killer. Is that someone who should seek help to talk to someone? I can imagine, second-guessing everything about myself if that happened to me. Certainly, I would think it'd be the right thing for family members to do, but do you think coworkers and others who knew him are folks that need to seek help in order to just make sure their mental health is on point?
Certainly if it's bothering them, if they're feeling haunted about it, having nightmares about it, and some people are very sensitive and probably do react that way. Not everybody's the same, and he may be able to discuss it with his family and friends and move on and let it roll off. I think for many of us, particularly women, we would probably be taking it on a deeper level.
Yeah, I would imagine so. We'll get into that in just a moment. Ladies, please stand by. They are good. You guys are going to be sticking around with me while we take a break. Now, when we come back, we'll analyze the public's fascination with serial killers. But first, Here's a preview of what's coming up next in the next hour of Closing Arguments. In Cuyahoga County.
All right, I'm just gonna fast forward this here. Get back to the segment. Okay, let me just wait for this music, and we'll get back to the segment.
State police. Yeah, there's somebody after me. I'm sorry? There's somebody after me.
This is a 13-year case, so as
That's
you
chilling.
saw, we have a great deal of information, evidence, photographs, reports.
This case is a case that we're going to try in the courtroom. The press has convicted my client without seeing a shred of evidence.
She had no idea any of this was going on, or the allegations were even. Her husband was a suspect.
The charges in the indictment are just allegations, so this is the first
Let's
step
take this call. Hang on.
in the
Be right back.
process of proving those allegations.
Now, authorities had been on the lookout for the so-called Long Island serial killer for years. Now, Rex Heuermann has been charged with murdering 3 of the 11 victims whose remains were found on Gilgo Beach. And at this point, the evidence appears overwhelming, though he has proclaimed his innocence. Now, after Heuermann's arrest, onlookers and media surrounded Heuermann's home to catch a glimpse of his family, watch investigators collecting evidence, and just see the place where the alleged killer was hidden in plain sight for years. Now, media waited outside the courthouse when Heuermann was arraigned as well, and photographers snapped pictures of him inside the courtroom. But the public's fascination with an accused serial killer is not new. There have been countless books, movies, podcasts about notorious killers like Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, BTK, and others.
Sorry,
you know their
my
names.
car is ready. I was
What is that about? These terrible
major
crimes
car
that
repairs.
actually fascinate people.
I had to take that call. I have major car repairs that are being done today, and I have major car repairs that are being done tomorrow. So I haven't had a vehicle for 2 days, but I'm getting everything fixed that's needed to be fixed. And unfortunately, my particular car, getting it fixed is very expensive. So they just gave me a call at the garage. Unfortunately, I'm going to be spending a lot more money today than I thought it was going to be, but it's done. I just have to walk up 2 blocks and pick it up. But we're going to finish this stream first, and then I'm going to go out and get my car. But I do want to recognize, I saw while I was away, Brenda, thank you so much for the $4 super sticker. I appreciate that. It helps support the channel. Really kind of you today to do that. Again, we're just chilling here.
Great cash, homie.
Doing a little lunchtime stream, a little lunchtime watch party. So thank you so much. I'm in loop mode right now, and we'll finish this up, and then I'm going to head out and grab my car.
All right, joining us tonight, psychotherapist and author of The Minds of Mass Killers, Understanding and Interrupting the Pathway of Violence, Siobhan Scott. Also with us, psychotherapist and CEO of Life Counseling Solutions, Dr. Janie Lacey, plus professor of forensic psychology, Dr. Catherine Ramsland. And joining us now as well, serial killer expert, criminologist, and author of the book, Why We Love Serial Killers, Dr. Scott Baum. Thank you again all for being with me. Scott, thank you for joining us. And since you have a book, which is actually the exact topic that we're talking about, I'll start with you. And let me just ask you the broad question. You know, what is this fascination that the public and all of us, especially those of us who love true crime, have with serial killers?
Well, thank you for having me on and asking the question. And yes, this is something that I travel around the country speaking about all the time. And I always start by saying that I believe that we as humans have a fascination generally with things that are larger than life and frightening. And that can be natural disasters like tsunamis and hurricanes. It can be natural predators like polar bears and lions. And I have made an argument many times that a serial killer like Jeffrey Dahmer actually has 3 things in common with a great white shark. And those 3 things are that they're rare, exotic, and deadly. And interestingly, as a society, we actually celebrate a Shark Week every year that recently was celebrated on Discovery Network. And thanks to the Oxygen Network, we also have a Serial Killer Week for the last couple of years. So they are truly part of our popular culture. Yeah. And it is this larger than life
murder mystery is a very part of our popular culture.
I really think it comes down more than anything else to empathy. It's the thing that we have, the public has, that these diabolical killers do not. And I think the true crime followers, particularly women, have empathy for the victims, of course, because many of them, in fact, most in these cases are women, but also a genuine desire to understand the mind of the predator, because they seem so incomprehensible and over the top that they're truly terrifying. And I think almost at an unconscious level, we think that if we can somehow understand these individuals, then maybe they're not so terrifying after all. So I think empathy is a big part of this fascination.
You know, it's interesting. I've read a couple of things that you've written, and you've actually compared, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, but I think you compared movies about serial killers, whether it be Saw or, you know, any movie with a serial killer, Halloween, that type of thing. You called it popcorn entertainment, and I think you had likened it to our fascination with people like a Jeffrey Dahmer, for instance. Yeah, that same fascination exists in the same way. Can you explain that? Or if, of course, if I'm correct or not, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, I think what you described is fairly accurate. You know, at one level, at a very superficial level, how different is a documentary about Ted Bundy to a movie like Saw? It's simply a shocking and frightening entertainment. But then you have to go beneath the surface and realize that the Dahmers and the Bundys, etc., are killing real living human beings. And it's when Jeffrey Dahmer comes to your front door, or Ted Bundy comes to your front door, that it becomes very real. And so I think that there is this need, you know, this underlying need to understand these predators. And I speak all the time to groups around the country. And interestingly, 80%, consistently 80% of my audience is female. And I think women in particular want to be wary. They want to have tools to use so that the next Ted Bundy doesn't enter their lives. And I find this to be consistently true. So that empathy factor, I think, is particularly true for women.
That's interesting, because even though women may be interested in that, when I look into serial killers and I'm reading about them, I'm particularly interested in their modus operandi, their methods. That's what seems to interest me. But let me get other people involved in this conversation with the fundamental question. You know, what do you think it is that drives this fascination? And Dr. Lacey, I'll start with you. What is it that you think drives this fascination that the public has with these characters?
Well, let me start by pulling out a word that I've just heard Scott say, and he said the word incomprehensible. Right. So what we're talking about is this quest to comprehend the incomprehensible. So we all have this innate human curiosity, and especially when it comes to dangerous situations, right? Because it's not only going to provoke fear, but it's also going to provoke curiosity. And our natural inclination is to be intrigued by dangerous situations, because sometimes we think in a general public intrigue that if we can learn about it, then we can detect it. And we can detect it, then we can protect ourselves. And then you also have that other side of it, you know, as he's mentioning about the popcorn entertainment, right? So there's this fascination where you can get close to the danger, but yet not be close to the danger. And you can sit and you can have that adrenaline and all the things that we experience indirectly when we experience dangerous situations by vicariously looking into them.
Siobhan Scott, I'm going to ask you the same question, but I'll add a little bit to it. You know, we know that folks have an interest in any kind of high-profile crime. Is it fair to say that people are more interested in serial killers? And I think Scott was clear that, you know, we have a week of serial killers, so it's clear that there is. But we have lots of programs about different kinds of kids, women who kill, you know, children who kill, those types of things. Is it fair to say that people have an inordinate amount of interest in this type of situation?
I think there may be some people who do, and if they're fixated on this topic all the time, that may be a little bit of a red flag that something's going on for them at a deeper level that maybe they need to look at. But I think most of us, I agree completely with Scott, the interest is about safety. I was growing up in California in the 70s and 80s, and I remember when the Golden State Killer was rampaging through the state with the awful rapes and murders. And I was a teenager home alone at night a great deal of the time, and I was terrified, and my friends were terrified. So I think we're all fascinated with, how do I learn more about this? Are there things we can spot, and how do we stay safe? I think that's the biggest motivator. And then certainly there are people who love roller coasters and shark documentaries, and they love scary things. And so that's just a little bit of entertaining excitement. It's a jolt of adrenaline. It feels good to people, and that's pretty harmless. And I think maybe there's a very small percentage of people, fortunately small percentage, who share some qualities with serial killers and are attracted because they admire them. I don't think that's common, but I do think it happens. And something along those lines is going on with the women who fall in love with them or become enamored with them and write them letters and try to have relationships with them. It's a different kind of process for people like that.
Yeah, I think those women are a whole nother show, quite frankly. But to your first point, in our home, one thing my mother always taught us is, if you fear something, learn more about it. Maybe that's something that's at play here as well. All right, please stand by, folks. A programming note before we do take a short break. Tomorrow night, here on Closing Arguments, Vinnie Politan and a panel of experts are diving into the case of a father gunned down in front of his own child in Florida. The victim's brother will also be joining Vinny as
Alec
well.
Baldwin,
His ex-wife, who made her first.
There's a couple of things I'm going to probably do this week. Alec Baldwin still could face charges in the Rust shooting, and Michael Jackson, his case, the two individuals, Wade and I can't think of the other guy's name right now. They are moving forward with another case against Michael Jackson, and there was just some conversation about that. So I may do some streams on that this week. Two cases that need to be followed again. All right, let's keep playing this out. We probably got about another 15 minutes or so. I'm going to wrap this lunchtime up, and then I definitely will be back sometime this evening, and I have something cooked up really good for tonight's stream. So let's play this out, and then we're going to...
First court appearance since her arrest, and her new husband and another man are charged with his murder. More of the case of Florida versus Shanna Gardner tomorrow night, starting at 8 p.m. Eastern. And now I do want to thank Scott Bond for joining us. Thank you so much, Scott. It was great to hear your insights. My other guest will be sticking around. And when we come back, the psychology of alleged serial killer Rex Heuermann and others. Don't go away. Coming up next here on Closing Arguments.
These are the cases that captivated the world.
I'm gonna just move this forward. As far as the armor and the Rust shooting, the last thing that I heard on her was there was alleged allegations that she might have been hung over the day that that happened, so she wasn't in a right state of mind. Okay, let's play through this, and again, I'll do some I'll do some reporting on that. Maybe we'll look into see if there's any new case update information on Rust. And I did hear that they are seeking possible new charges against Alec Baldwin. Max Lynn, thanks for checking in. Hello. Links, thanks for checking in. All right, let's play through this.
Files to find out how to watch.
Another 10 minutes or so, we should have this. I gotta go get in the car.
To announce the indictment of defendant Rex Andrew Heuermann, 59 years of age. And he's been arrested by the Suffolk County Police Department's homicide detectives. And he's been indicted for the murders of Melissa Bartholomew, Megan Waterman, and Amber Costello.
Hey, Terry, how are you? Good to see you.
On July 13th, 2023, architect Rex Heuermann was arrested in connection with 3 of the Gilgo Beach murders and remains a prime suspect in the killing of Maureen Brainard Barnes. For more than a decade, the bodies unearthed on Gilgo Beach in New York terrified residents. 9 women, a man, and a toddler were discovered, and police believe Heuermann is connected to 4.
Rex Heuermann is a demon that walks among us, a predator that ruined families.
During a training exercise on December 11th, 2010, the remains of Melissa Bartholomew were discovered. 2 days later, the remains of Maureen, Megan, and Amber were all found. All 4 victims were petite females, believed to be sex workers, missing clothes, and bound in a similar fashion. They were killed by homicide. Before their disappearance, they had been contacted by a person using a burner phone.
For each of the murders, he got an individual burner phone, and he used that to communicate with the victims. And then shortly after the death of the victims, he then would get rid of the burner phone.
According to the phone records, investigators believed the serial killer lived in Massapequa Park and worked in Midtown Manhattan near Penn Station. They discovered Heuermann had access to several burner phones, and the calls were made inside what police called the box. Their suspect would also make sadistic calls near his office to the victims' families, with one particular call asking Barthelemy's teenage sister, quote, "Do you think you'll ever speak to her again?"
They had these phone records from day one. As you mentioned, they had the description of the guy, the car. They had all the information they needed.
A key detail in the investigation would be buried for years as a police chief was arrested for obstruction of justice. But in March of 2022, weeks after a new task force formed, an investigator found a witness description of a man matching Heuermann's characteristics at Amber Costello's home.
That individual was identified as a person who was between 6'4" and 6'6". A large man. Also of significance was the fact that he was driving a dark-colored, black, first-generation Chevrolet Avalanche.
Investigators would later find Heuermann's Chevy Avalanche in South Carolina.
One of the things that we did is we followed him because we wanted to get an abandonment sample of his DNA.
Investigators collected Heuermann's DNA from a discarded pizza crust and linked him to a hair found on a burlap covering Megan Waterman's remains. The investigation continues with the search of Heuermann's home and the possibility of other murder charges. He claims he is innocent and has an attorney who says he did not commit these murders.
In terms of speaking to my client, the only thing I can tell you that he did say as he was in tears was, "I didn't do this."
Look, there are still many unanswered questions in the Long Island serial killer case, though Rex Heuermann has been charged with the murders of Melissa Barthelemy, Megan Waterman, and Amber Costello, and remains the main suspect in the murder of Maureen Brainerd Barnes. Now, we still don't know how these victims died exactly, but during a press conference, Suffolk County District Attorney Ray Tierney, he shared some details on how the woman's remains were found. Take a listen.
The victims went missing between July of 2010 and July of 2007 and September of 2010. And in December of 2010, they were their bodies were recovered. They were buried in a similar fashion, in a similar location.
Horrible.
In a similar way.
Nightmare.
All the women were petite. They were. They all did the same thing for a living. They all advertised the same way, and there were similarities with regard to the crime scenes. All the women were bound at the head, at the midsection, or at the chest, and later at the legs. The other thing I think that that's been talked about in the media was they were bound by burlap. That has taken a life of its own in the media, and the burlap has been described or thought to be the burlap that's used at a nursery for. That's not the burlap that was used in this case. The burlap was camouflage burlap used for duck blinds of hunting. Obviously it was used to purposely hide the bodies.
So you heard it there. I mean, the meticulous nature with which he disposed of these bodies.
Hey, Diana,
it's got to say something. So what does this information tell us about this alleged killer's psyche? Still with us tonight, psychotherapist and author of The Minds of Mass Killers, Understanding and Interrupting the Pathway of Violence, Siobhan Scott, psychotherapist and CEO of Life Counseling Solutions, Dr. Janie Lacey, plus professor of forensic psychology, Dr. Catherine Ramsland. And Dr. Ramsland, I'll start with you. And the question I asked just there, you heard the meticulous nature with which he seemed to wrap the ritualistic type killing. Talk to me about the mind of a killer and what we've learned about him tells us about him as a serial killer.
Well, his killings probably would start in his fantasy life, and he would prepare a hit kit. He would prepare ways to hook the victims, attract them to him, bring them to his home or someplace close by. He would know ahead of time where he was going to put the bodies, how he was going to handle them, how he was going to bind them. He'd have the implements he needed to do that. And he did this in a very organized way. And in fact, they were laid out very close, very carefully in almost the same distance from one another, all four of them, in a very clear row. So we have an organized, calculating killer who probably did a lot of planning and enjoyed a lot of that planning. That would have been part of it, is what he's going to do, how he's going to get away with it, where he's going to put them, and how people will not know it's him.
Yeah, I've heard the connection made between his chosen profession, the fact that he's an architect, which takes a lot of planning, and all those attributes that you're mentioning existed in his personal life. And here he is sort of playing out the same thing in his other darker life.
Crazy.
Dr. Lacey, the question I have for you is, are these, and we heard him called a demon. He was a demon among us. That's how the police referred to him. Are they created by nature or nurture?
When we look at someone who becomes identified as a serial killer, and then there's evidence that supports that, what we particularly look at is their presence of psychopath characteristics, right? So we're looking at their lack of empathy, their manipulation, their just disregard for the societal norms of which we operate from. And then as we just heard, right, then there's this pattern of serial killing, which then comes from their fixation and comes from, when we look back to their history, we do see, and this is important to say, not everyone that has had this in their history means they're going to be a serial killer, but we're looking at the presence of childhood trauma, we're looking at the presence of childhood abuse, and then we're also looking at there's some type of presence of cruelty or aggression that comes as a younger person. Sometimes that is towards animals. So there's this pattern that starts to develop over time. And sometimes we'll also see neglect. But it's very important to say that just because those things are there in someone's childhood does not mean they're going to grow up to be a serial killer at all. But we do see it turning into anger and that resentment, and then ultimately what these cases present themselves to be.
All right. Now, court documents also revealed a lot about accused ex-killer or accused killer Rex Heuermann. Now, the state's application to deny bail outlined disturbing internet searches, including pedophilia, torture-related pornography, searches for the names of the victims and the family members,
Crazy.
and searches about the investigation itself, like these. This is some of the
Yeah,
ones
I know, right?
this is what he
Super
was searching.
fascinated.
Why could law enforcement not trace the calls made by the Long Island serial killer? Why hasn't the Long Island serial killer been caught?
These are
The
things that he
Gilgo
was
Beach
searching.
killer / Criminal Minds. In Long Island serial killer investigation, new phone technology may be key to break in case. So you've got all that stuff. And after investigators finished searching the Heuermann's house and the crowds dwindled in the neighborhood, Court TV crime and justice correspondent actually spoke to Rex's estranged wife, Asa Ellerup, outside the home. Take a listen.
How are you holding up? I know you can't talk about the case. How are you holding up?
What you see, right? It is what it is.
How's your children doing?
Not going to tell for that one. Not going there.
Have you spoken to your husband?
And I'm not going there either. That's already been, his lawyer's already answered that question.
How are you getting through the day with media and with all the questions? I know it must be tough.
Moment by moment, not hour by hour, moment by moment.
Now, I can't imagine what that poor woman has been through. Making a clean break, good for her.
Crazy.
Quickly, Siobhan Scott, I want to ask you about this idea that he was so interested in his own case. And there were also reports that not only was he looking up the names of victims, he also called one of the family members, asking them almost taunting questions about the victim that he, well, at least he allegedly killed. What do you make of that?
It shows the sadism really the taking pleasure in seeing people suffer. And not only did he take their family member's life, now he's taunting them. And that just, the fact that a person gets pleasure from seeing people in pain, again, that's very foreign to most of us. Most of us have empathy and we feel compassion when people are suffering. But a person like this is opposite, and he took pleasure in that.
Yeah, one has to wonder if there's any guilt. I know sometimes these guys can feel guilt after, but this type of taunting makes me believe maybe not this particular individual, whoever is responsible for these crimes and those calls. All right. I want to thank my guests for joining me this past hour. Siobhan Scott, Dr. Janie Lacey, Dr. Catherine Ramsland. Thank you so much for joining us.
All right. That is it. That was a great little mini episode there on Court TV. Again, I wanted to report on that. Had some really great content on Rex Heuermann. Kind of compared the psychology of Rex Heuermann, Ted Bundy. You saw Jeffrey Dahmer, and they talk BTK as well. So, just getting a good grand scope of how all those particular individuals act and what their behaviors are. And I just found that to be a super, super fascinating episode. And to sit through and just kind of do a little lunchtime watch party with you all. Okay, I need to head out. I'm going to go get my car from the garage. So I have a car back today. And then tomorrow my car is actually going back to another shop to get some tires installed and a much needed alignment. So my car is going to be pretty much tied up tomorrow as well too. I will be back tonight. Just keep an eye out for the tile. I have an amazing stream cooked up for tonight. You're not going to want to miss it. So hopefully I can see some of you back here later on tonight. If not, I know you will catch this on replay. If you're watching this on replay, please go down there and comment below #replay. I would enjoy it. Thank you, Danielle. Thanks everybody for being here. Mind your business. Cater. Terry was here. She's hanging out on vacation. Diana's here. A whole bunch of Donna's been here. So thanks for hanging out. I appreciate you all, and I will talk to you all soon. I'm going to go drive around. Yep, I'm going to go drive around. Okay, have a good day, folks, and I will be back tonight, hopefully to see you then. Take care. I'm out of here.